What do you think, Bar? What is it like to be CEO of No? Did Jeremiah leave like a mess for you to clean up? What's the deal?
No, I think luckily, well, so for one, Jeremiah's still like, somewhat involved. I don't know what percentage you'd say Jeremiah of your week, maybe like 5-10%. So it's not like I was just like left with, like, no support and no context at all. But, yeah, I think, it's fun. We're doing some new things that we can talk about, like with NPS, but yeah, overall, it's kind of like the same. I think for the most part, it wasn't like a just night and day shift. It wasn't like one day Jeremiah woke up and was like, I'm gonna go do this stamp thing. It was more of like a gradual shift, and then like one day we announced it to the public. So I feel like some, from an outside looking in, they might think that, but it really was like a pretty gradual shift. I don't know how you feel about that, Jeremiah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I still feel customer support things from people and drop it. And I mean, even today, there was a big thread of all the new product stuff that got released this week. And so I dropped in. I was like, hey, what about this thing? Are we still doing it? So I still get to do some of those things, but I'm not just doing as much of the day to day. So, but what I should
Got
have
it.
done
So
is like
so what Jeremiah does is meddle while you have to run the business. This is like roughly how this is shaken out, basically.
meddling as low as possible. I try to be very I don't know. What do you think, Bar? You could disagree with me here. Do you feel like I meddle too much, or is it an appropriate level of meddle?
I think it's the appropriate level. I think it's kind of I like one topic is I think our product team, and I would say this to them, so I'm okay saying it on the air too. I think we've been moving really, really slow over the last year or so. Like it, like one thing that sticks with me is Sean Frank. I don't know if any of you guys were ranked by him. Like he did like the star system and sent out an email with the operators. This is probably like a year and a half, 2 years ago now. But he gave No like a 3 out of 5 stars for like not innovating much. And that like, that stings because he's a customer. He's been a customer for a long time. So yeah, like we haven't innovated much in the last 2 years. And I'm very much trying to change that. Obviously, Jeremiah helps a ton with that vision. And so to go back to the original question, I think he's really helping like set the vision and then almost keeping us accountable, because he's like out of the business for X amount of time. So then like he is the outsider looking in. So when we say we're going to release a feature in X amount of time, he doesn't really know what's going on in the business and like what certain tasks like lead up to the bigger picture. So like this morning, for example, he was like, hey, what else is remaining to be done and how are we looking on that? Where like everyone on the team would probably know that, but Jeremiah doesn't because he's not like in the day to day. So it kind of keeps us accountable.
So I just
You know
annoy
what's so,
people with dumb questions.
yeah, yeah. I was gonna say, what's so interesting about that is that's exactly what it feels like to have an investor on your board. So, um, it's also, I think the more useful part of this, and I'm like being a little funny about it, but the most useful part of this is like for other people who have SaaS businesses. At some point, you're going to want to know, like Zach, I'm actually curious what your answer to this is. Like, at some point, you're going to ask yourself, do I want to continue to run this business? Do I want someone else to run the business? Do I want to sell the business? And this is a version of, okay, I'm going to groom another leader from the company to run the business, right? Um, yeah, and it's an interesting, like, quote unquote, changing of guard, changing of leader. Yeah, Zach, I'm curious, like, like, do you want to run it until an exit point? Do you think that at some point you might want to you might have someone else run the business? Like, how do you think you would make this decision, and how have friends of yours made this type of decision?
My ideal situation is that I run it until an exit. But like, and like the reason for that is that I think there's like a lot of like really, really good data around like the outcomes of companies led by the founder. And like, I also just like couldn't really imagine a hired CEO like figuring out how to sell the business. Like unless they were like really incentivized in like some very particular way. And then like also it's just like, it's also just like not my vibe. Like I think there's like these people that are like super, super operator and they're like, they build businesses and they install people. It's just like not me. Like I definitely approach it from like, I do like working on it. And so I would definitely hire someone as like a COO that was for all intents and purposes CEO though. That's certainly something that I would do. But like a CEO from like an operations, like all of the other things for business, like I would do that would be great.
Are there some examples you guys can think of businesses that brought in that, call it like step in leader, step in CEO that are crushing it right now?
I mean, the best example of all time was Snowflake, right? Like, Snowflake has always had an outside CEO, and currently has an outside CEO, is doing just fine. I know a bunch in the private markets in like SaaS that's outside of ecom that has had like an outside CEO brought in once they hit like starting at roughly the $30 million revenue scale, like somewhere between the $20 and $40 million revenue scale, they crush it. One that people don't talk about a lot is HashiCorp. Do you guys know the HashiCorp story? This is a fucking phenomenal story. And then Bar, I want to continue to talk about your experience, but the HashiCorp story. So Mitchell Hashimoto and his co-founder, in the first couple of years of HashiCorp, they were trading off being CEO. They were co-founders, and they were like, "Oh, you should be. Eventually, they like talked to each other one day, and they were like, "Neither of us wants to be CEO, right?" And they're like, "Yeah, like I don't like this, like because the CEO job and the founder job are not the same." And eventually, everybody realizes this at some point in the company. And again, usually that's around $20 to $40 million of revenue, right? Because like now you're dealing with like real for HashiCorp, it happened much earlier. It happened like at $2 million of revenue because they had a big open source project. There's a lot of reasons, but anyway, they brought in an outside CEO, and HashiCorp has crushed it with an outside CEO the entire time. And so there are lots of examples of successes with outside CEOs or outside people running the company. Yes, the average data is that the founder CEO leads to better outcomes. And then I'll say the last thing, and then again, I really, Bar, I want to hear more about your experience. But do you guys listen to My First Million? Yeah. So like Sean, for example, doesn't run any of his companies, right? And so anyways, that it's like, it's just one of those things that when you are building companies, I think it's a worthwhile question to
Well, I
interact
also
with.
think that the role, like I think that the label of CEO before you have like 50 employees is so silly. Like,
Right. I saw someone the other day
you're
who
just
called
a
themselves
you're just
the
a founder.
managing-
Like you're not really a
Right.
CEO. Like people that are like 3 people and they're just like, and they're like LinkedIn says CEO, COO, and it's just like, no, you're just a bunch of like retards with laptops, dude. Like, chill out. It's like I just don't really understand like the CEO label when there's not like a lot of people, because like if what you are doing is like CEO tasks at that level, like you're probably not even doing the right thing.
I saw someone with their self given title was managing partner of like an organization with like 3 people. I'm like, oh, it's a sleight of hand. Right? You're making it seem like this is a lot bigger than it is. But yeah, it's a real role, right? It exists for a reason. I don't know about this word outside CEO, because all these CEOs, they come inside after they're hired, right? And they have a job to do, right? And so all of them are judged based on whether they can do that role properly.
Jack, that's like a George Carlin joke. What is an outside CEO? They're inside.
I definitely agree with
But it's
this.
not like a fractional CEO, right? This isn't someone who's outside of the business anymore, right? They're very, very much in the business, and they're there for a reason.
Well, I actually think that the reason why it's so different is because it is so different to come into an organization with at a level that you are CEO with having zero prior context. Like there is significantly different like approaches to like those two people versus like for example, like the company that bought Noah's, like that bought Social Snowball, like the CEO of that company started as like an SDR like 20 years ago or something crazy. Like that's not an outside CEO, and like that, and the way that he approached the day that he became CEO would be so much different than if they were to like go through a recruiter and then hire the CEO. And the company would probably go in different directions because it's like when you have the context, it is just like so much different.
I think when
Is that how you feel, Bar?
I think I feel well. So yeah, outside CEO I would never do. That's just change management, and everyone's gonna be like, "Who the fuck are you, and why are you here?"
What if they crush? This is just blowing my mind. What if this person is incredible, right? Like, what if they do an incredible job? You were mentioning earlier that you were in this star list for Sean Frank 2 years ago, and you got 3 out of 5 for lack of innovation. And then, but like things are still moving slowly, right? Don't get me wrong. I'm sure Noah's innovating now, but what if an outside CEO crushed it, right, and did an incredible job?
Yeah, I think that outside CEO would need to bring in their own team. I think it's really hard to like come in and have an existing team with an existing functionality that is or an existing process that like a brand new person comes in and is able to like drive that ship. Yeah, I think my experience is also a little bit different. I like came up in the world of like so like my first job was working. I don't know if you guys know Noah Kagan. We like kind of brought like sumo.com to the forefront. This is like way back in the day when Shopify was just getting started, Klaviyo was just getting started. Like, you could go outbound cold email like 100 people and 50 of them would get on a call with you and 30 would close. It was like, just a different world of D2C ecom. And like his whole philosophy was like, how do I bring someone in to be an operator, to be that CEO, and for me to like turn it into like more of a lifestyle business and take like distributions for AppSumo and for Sumo. And if you like follow the Noah journey, it's like literally like on off, like which like I love Noah, but like at the end of the day, it does end up kind of coming back to like Zach's point that like the founder is really like the core person that can lead. Eamon, I don't know if you guys follow AppSumo at all. Eamon like kind of came in and he took him to like 100 million for a bit. Now he's doing like his own CEO coaching stuff, but eventually like he left, right? And then like some other people have tried to step into that role, and I think that role is really, really, really hard to fill. So yeah, I don't have that much experience with like outside, quote unquote outside, CEO stuff, but yeah, I think the only like in my experience, like what I've seen is you need to have someone that knows the business inside and out, knows the customer, knows the pain point. So yeah.
What do you think, Bar? Like, what is your diagnosis of what led to, and what is the current challenge for the pace of innovation that you are unsatisfied with?
Yeah, I think I would probably like if I had to just put one one diagnosis, I'd probably say shiny object syndrome. And I think we have chased that shiny object without really putting all our eggs into that shiny object. So then the next week, another shiny object comes. That'd be like kind of like the core, like overarching theme. And then there's, all the other, just infrastructure, all the like things that happen in like SaaS. And then the third is probably, I think it's probably like a downstream effect of like being owned by a publicly traded company and being a part of a portfolio company. I think there's there's just like the upside is just not as high as, doing a bootstrap thing or doing a VC back thing. So yeah, I think I would kind of categorize it into those three buckets.
So that last one, is that capping the motivation of the team to execute?
I would say in some ways it is. There's just there isn't as much of an upside as there is with other businesses. So it turns into more of a lifestyle business versus a like hockey stick, type business.
I was just going to share one thing that I've learned in the like venture-backed startup world, which I'm curious if this is like sort of what you're describing, is you want to feel like your efforts, if it leads to the business growing, it will lead to your outcome changing in a commensurate way. And so a thing, I mean, the way obviously that VC-backed companies do it is by issuing options, right? And so, like we actually just went through this exercise because we raised our B 6 months ago or whatever, 5 months ago. And so we're like, there was an option for secondary in that round for people who wanted it, and there was an option to like re-up people, right? And so like it does this thing where people feel the value of their equity because they were asked if they wanted to sell. And it also does this thing where it's like, wow, I'm being given more equity in this company. And so I'm like increasing my ownership in the outcome of this thing. And I think that at least in the VC world, that's like how you get that like extra energy from people, because they see their effort directly tied to the outcome, basically. But in your context, like Jeremiah and Bar, I'm very curious how you guys do this, and Zach, I'm very curious in the bootstrap world how you think about this. Yeah.
Yeah, and I
Profit
think
sharing on December 31st.
nice.
Wow, you literally do profit share with people?
Yeah. And it's like, it's not predefined at the beginning of the year. It's, I usually spend like Boxing Day until New Year's, like doing like a lot of planning and shit, which I'm actually building a new business.
What is
Potentially.
Boxing Day?
Sorry, it's like a Canadian thing that's like Black Friday, but it's the day after Christmas. And like the whole thing was like, it was something like, oh, like stores had like a bunch of like, it was just like get boxes out of the store for like the new shipment inventory to come in. And that was how it started. And it's kind of like a Black Friday thing in Canada. It's the day after Christmas. And then, so then I just, send out wires between December 26th and January 1st, based on like performance and things like that. And actually like how profitable the business was.
Zach, can I ask a naive question?
Yeah.
Why did you choose profit sharing over giving people slices of equity?
Well, there's like a few things. Like one, like some people do have options. I really like equity for myself because
Totally. I love equity too.
I also just think that like if I were to like multiply the likelihood of, I obviously think that options to employees is the biggest scam of all time. And I'm not saying it doesn't work, but I think it's the biggest fucking sham of all time, especially when people are raising at like a 25x multiple. I think it's fucking bullshit. I think that most people, I think it's good for you to do, but I think actually tangibly in the way that it like facilitates in people's lives is next to nothing. I have like a ton of equity in which I cannot realize in other companies. And so it is super valuable if you want to stay with a company super long term, but like the lock in the liquidity that exists for most people. And if you think about like the average time horizon for liquidity to happen, and then if you even take into account the compounding effect of profit sharing, and then what would probably be like a diluted price versus like the last round, it potentially would have been better for people to get cash those like last 5 years and have it invested in a lot of cases. But I do think it's a really great carrot.
Yeah, I'm with Zach.
I'm not saying it's not.
I don't know if I'd go as far as calling it a massive sham, but I do. I'm with Zach in that generally speaking, I don't think equity is meaningful for employees. If you're on a founding team, if you're C-suite, in those kinds of cases, then yeah, equity is great. But I think for a typical employee, it like 99.99% of the time, it's not going to be meaningful for you. Now it can be great for like a lottery ticket, but like you've got to be on the right rocket ship. You see all the time companies that get to massive exits, and because of the way that they got there, the equity is not worth anything to most people in that context anyway. So, and obviously that doesn't always happen, but I think that's the majority of cases. So I kind of agree with the idea of, I don't know, I have mixed feelings about it. I think there's something, I think some version of it where like you get to share in the profits of the business, or you have some sort of, if you can grow the company based on like this formula, for example, there's some sort of incentive for you at the end of that. I think that's interesting. But actual just like straight up options, I think don't work for most people. But like, I think it yeah, obviously there's exceptions to that for sure. And Prashant, it sounds like some of your employees actually got like pretty good payouts probably. But it seems like to me, that's the exception, not the norm.
I mean, also like
Yeah,
these new marketplaces are making it different as well.
I was gonna say that. I think like I think that I would have been more on your side of the spectrum 3 years ago. Um, I think the liquidity in the secondary market is a lot more liquid than was historically true. And I think that the fraction of companies that are able to provide liquidity along the way has also increased a lot. Um, both because of what you were saying in terms of the marketplaces and things like that, but also because VCs are wisening up to the fact that people need to provide liquidity to their employees along the way. Otherwise, this whole thing doesn't work. And so actually they are way more willing to buy secondary than they've ever been. And there are like a bunch of funds getting created because of this new realization who only buy secondary. And so I think I understand where the perception is coming from, and I know that there's a bunch of companies that are like that, and that people like actually don't make money off of that equity. But I'm not sure the direction of travel is going to stay that way. Basically, yeah.
Well, I do think that like, I mean, I generally believe that private company stock is going to become more liquid than ever before in the next 5 years. Like, I'm like, I think if you can just like look at like what's happening with like the world in general, like everything's becoming tradable and everything's becoming tokenized and everything's becoming gambleable. And so like over the next 5 years, I think private companies stock will be in a much different place. But then I also think it is important too to like make sure that your incentive structure is actually aligned with what the business is optimizing for. And like currently, Foreplay does not optimize for enterprise value. And so to like be giving equity as an incentive would be like two sides of a coin that don't match, you know, like it doesn't
Got
really
it.
make that much sense.
Yeah, that's all we do. Like 100% of what we do is to optimize for enterprise value.
But that's the goal. The goal is the sale.
I've talked with a couple publicly traded companies that you think would not care about profit, but they are publicly traded software companies that operate at like a 30 to 40% net margin. They're like, yeah, we don't acquire things at 10%. We don't acquire things at 7%. Why would we bring in revenue at like a lower net margin for our shareholders? And so it's like, based on even like what I've seen from like the people that would potentially want to acquire us, like really, really healthy net margins is actually what would get the deal done, not double our ARR.
Bar, how do you guys think about it in the context of like a portco? For like, what are the incentives that could drive people? What are the tools at the disposal for someone in that context?
Yeah, it's mostly cash. Yeah, similar to Zach. I think, yeah, for us, it's probably cash. Like the reason why people work at No is cash and lifestyle. I would kind of categorize it. You know, we are definitely steadily growing, but I think if you were to talk to any of our employees, like you know, our average employee's been there for like 2.5, 3 years. We have people that have been there for much longer than that. You know, in general, people are happy to be there because it's never like a like stay up all night type grind. Like we do have like sprints that like do feel like that, but in general, you know, we have like one person on the team that has an e-commerce business on the side. You know, we like a lot of people have like kind of side projects and are able to like provide value for No and like bring in enough value for No to more than cover their salary, but then also have enough time on the side to do their own things.
It's very efficiency focused. So definitely not a grow at all cost mindset. And this actually comes out of Tiny, our acquirer. They are like, their whole thing is they want to buy great businesses and run them forever. That's the idea. And so it's about steady, stable, profitable growth. And that means building a company and a culture that is that can do that can sustain that for a long period of time, right? So I think that's, yeah, it all kind of like you kind of see how like things naturally flow down from like what the goal is at the top. But yeah, I agree with Bar. Like I don't think, yeah, it's not, you don't have to work 60 hours a week. You do sometimes, like that happens, but it's not like, that's not the norm. Most people are working, you know, 40 to 50 hours a week, I would think. I guess I'm not involved in the day to day, but yeah, you don't have to, it doesn't feel like a crazy grind in the way that it could in different contexts.
If I could ask a very naive question, can you help me reconcile that and that, like what I would describe as like culture and value system with the shiny object syndrome that you talked about? Because you would expect shiny object syndrome at like a company like ours. It's like we're chasing growth. Literally we're chasing growth at all costs. And so like it's pretty obvious how you get shiny object syndrome. And so maybe help me put the shiny object syndrome in your context.
Yeah, I think instead of like, if we reframe it, it's instead of chasing growth at all costs, it's like satisfy the customer at all costs. And you know, I think that's like a lot of how we've grown. You know, we're at over 6,000 Shopify stores now, and you know, continue to grow is like, it's mostly like a brand play, right? Like on the No side, like they know us as the most helpful post-purchase survey tool. right? And we're in a lot of different places, like so it's like you hear about them a lot, and then you hear good things about them. That's kind of like ultimately what brand comes down to. But yeah, for us, I think historically it's been just chasing customer happiness. And I think one thing that I'm trying to kind of get the team to center around is if you build a product that if you only listen to your customers and only build products that your customers or features that your customers are asking for, you're probably going to end up driving to the ground. Like, your customers don't necessarily know what they don't know. Obviously, you should always survey your customers. You should always be in touch with what they are asking for. But there is a pretty big open space in the market a lot of times that they're not aware of. They're not aware of like macroeconomic issues happening. And so historically, this shiny object syndrome has been us just, kind of listening to customers and trying to satisfy them. And a lot of the shift that we're making now is, hey, yeah, we still definitely want to capture all of that data, and we have that data. Are we going to go have that as like a P1 priority for our product? Probably not. And so, yeah.
You should have that on the results of your no surveys. You've got all the information about what the customer wants, but then say, actually, don't do any of this. Pay attention to macroeconomic conditions instead.
Yeah. It's like I do think it's a little different for brands than it is for SaaS, right? Like, you look like at a Ridge, they're obviously like doing a bunch of like innovation, and they're going into a bunch of new product categories, and they certainly used post-purchase surveys for that. You look at some of these others that like are just in one category. That you're using those post-purchase surveys as like ad angles and like new creative and in that type of environment. And like a lot of times you do need to like look at that and take it with two grains of salt. Like you probably are hearing one thing, but knowing your business, you're going to actually interpret it in a different way. Right. Yeah, I think, I don't know. How do you guys think about like product innovation, product development? Are you guys listening to your customers? Or are you just like, what we know best? Is it like somewhere in the middle?
I mean, for sure. And I also think that I can kind of reconcile what looks like shiny object syndrome for Mutt, probably being something closer to rapid execution and testing and learning and moving forward. But the difference between that and shiny object syndrome is the lack of focus, right? When we talk about shiny object syndrome, we're talking about people looking at new things, trying new things, but then kind of dropping it, not seeing it the whole way through. So, I mean, I can see that in a culture of comfort. I just don't, I don't know if, I don't want to say it doesn't exist. And I'd love to hear what you guys think, especially you, Rashad, and I think I already know what you think, Zach. But is that the norm, or are businesses growing or slowing? Are they growing and they're motivated and impassioned and building what they think is right, or building what their customers want, or are they dying, right? Because I think you can do the heavy lifting, and Noah probably did, of building a great product and ride that wave for a while, maybe a really long while. But if you're not innovating, I don't know, it's one direction.
I also want to add a little bit to what Bar was saying too. I think when I think of shiny objects syndrome, I think part of the problem we've had at No is we built a product that is extraordinarily flexible, and it can do a lot of things. And so there's a lot of like, okay, well, we can do this one thing slightly different, and now it enables this entire new use case for somebody. So we have had over the last couple of years a lot of that, where it's a lot of like, we can kind of do this thing. It's not that great. It takes a lot of work. Like nobody else can do this, but like actually we're not doing it that well either. And so I think a big shift that we're making is really leaning in and saying, okay, well, instead of us being like an okay solution at 100 different things, like we still do that. You can still do these things, but let's also like pick a couple of very specific things and be excellent at those things. So like the one that we're working on, Bar just mentioned this, but Bar and I had a conversation 3 months ago where and this came from Bar, so credit where credit's due on this, where he basically was like, look, we have 10 different things that we're like trying to slowly push forward. I think we just need to pick one, and NPS is what we settled on, and just like go fully focused on making that excellent, and then pick one of these other things. And so instead of trying to like slowly push forward a bunch of different things at the same time, which doesn't work with our mandate to be profitable and grow sustainably, like that could work if we added, $2 million of extra cash into the business to go hire another engineering team, right? But in terms of the context of how we're trying to run this business, that doesn't work. And so we have to say, okay, let's pick an area of focus, be excellent at this thing. And like our NPS product that's coming out will be incredible. Like it is going to be the best NPS. Already what I've seen, it's the best NPS product for e-commerce, which makes sense because we actually were almost there already. We just needed to package it in a way that was easy for brands to use. And so that's the kind of thing that we're trying to do, where I think the shiny object syndrome looked a lot like half-baked things and a lot of different things because there's so many opportunities. And now it's like, okay, let's just focus and do this thing and do it really well.
I think sometimes retroactively looking back at something and saying it was shiny object syndrome can be also a side effect of marketing and go-to-market not properly servicing the new thing. And then also like activation of current customers. Like I'm a firm believer that it is way harder to get someone that used you for X to use you for Y than it is to acquire someone for Y. And so what happens is that you come out with this thing that for all intents and purposes could be great, or it's like 10 degrees of separation away from being great that you need iteration for. And what happens is your marketing go-to-markets continues to lean into the thing that you've always been known for because it's like, that's the playbook. But like you forget about how much iteration and how much work went into making X work. And now you're just like, oh, Y should just work alongside it. But it's like, no, like we've had this too, where it's just like, we've had customers be like, I can't believe you guys don't market this feature. It's so much better. And I was like, yeah, you're fucking right. So like, we still kind of just talk about the main thing. And so like, was it shiny object syndrome, or did marketing and go-to-market just like not make the shiny object thing go on the shelf like enough? Because if there was like thousands of people using it, you wouldn't be like, it was shiny object syndrome, right?
It's a good point, because if you think about like in software, the buying cycle for something is typically months, sometimes longer, depending on what it is in B2B software. And so you have to, that means that generally, if you're going to sell something that's meaningfully different from your core product to your existing customers, you still have to go through that cycle and that process. It's not like that it does get shortened a little bit, but it doesn't go away. And so if you don't see it out far enough, and from the sales and marketing side of things, it is just going to not really go anywhere.
I think, so Bar, I have a great idea for you, and you can choose to use it or not use it. But you should buy t-shirts for everyone on your team that says nope, like KNOPE, so that way they remember to just say no to everything. And you know what I mean? Like, so that's my one idea for you. But
they'll say no to working a little bit longer. It sounds like it's a very comfy culture. I'm a big fan of this idea that growth happens at the margin, right? The athletes make discoveries in exercise and health, right? The scientists make discoveries in science, right? The people who are crushing it, who are like hungry and ambitious, get things done, right? And I'd love to hear what your guys' thoughts are about building up a culture where that isn't really central, right? And then looking towards a future of the company that wants more innovation.
Yeah. One thing I would say on no, though, is I don't think I've worked in software cultures where it was about comfort and leisure. No is not that. Like, to be clear, like it's not about comfort and leisure. It's about sustainability, if that makes sense. Like I think there is actually like a meaningful difference there, where there's a version of building a software company where you're grinding as fast as you can, as hard as you can, because you see that there's you have a short-term objective, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's not how No operates. No's operating from how can we be better in a year than we are today, 5 years than we are today, 10 years than we are today, right? So it's a different sort of, so I don't know if that makes sense, Jack, but I do want to be clear. Like, it's not like we just like people just sit around and do nothing. People work very hard. People are very dedicated to what they do, but they feel like they can keep it up over a long period of time. And I think that's to me, I do think that's a distinction. And so I think you can still strive for excellence in that context without feeling like you might get burnt out in the process. And I think that is how I would frame that as being different. So, I mean, Bar, you went on a almost a month-long vacation this summer because he went and did a once-in-a-lifetime trip. And it's like, he can do that, but that doesn't mean he's doing that all the time, right?
Yeah. I just wanted to quickly chime in on this like idea of like how do you not have shiny object syndrome and things like that. We had this exact issue. Like it crept up on us basically because the company grew in headcount very fast between middle of last year and middle of this year. And at some point I had to tell people like, if you have more than one important thing that you're working on, like something is like terribly wrong. And Bar, your sequencing framework is the right framework. Like you can't tell me that you have 3 important things. Like if I ask someone like, hey, what is the one thing that you're working on? And like at our last like company offsite, you know, the like Avengers, like God, what's his name? Benedict Cumberbatch, he like puts his finger up. It's a different context, but it was like, I was like trying to get people to have some visceral image of like, think only about one thing. Because this is actually the way in which it always creeps up is people are just trying to like do multiple things. Now, I will say that there's a more serious thing that you could do is you could just tell people to ignore all customer requests. And we did do that for a while because it's the only way to get people to understand that they can actually do that. So you literally just say like anything that comes in, I want you to ignore for a period of time because you have to do something dramatic to get the momentum to shift. Like one of my big learnings about like how do you get the company to operate in a different way is you actually have to operate the company differently. And if you're not willing to operate the company differently, the company will not operate differently. And so you have to do some dramatic action. So we did that, and I coupled it with canceling all internal recurring meetings in favor of a daily stand-up for the entire company. And so people like felt like they woke up the next morning and their day was totally different. And they felt the difference because the company was operating differently. And so they were like, okay, I get it. Like we have to operate differently. So it's just something to think about is like, you're never going to get a change in operation unless you operate differently. So.
Yeah, it's good. It's good feedback. Swing the pendulum the other way, and then hopefully it equalizes in the middle. Yeah, how did you guys, like, if there were bugs that were coming in, were you guys also just ignoring that, or did you just customer feature requests?
It was all in the territory of what I understood Jeremiah was saying, which is like, hey, could you do this? Could you do this? And it was like always all feasible. And we used to say yes to a bunch of these paper cuts. And then we literally just blanket said no. I'm not joking. Like truly blanket said no. Bugs you have to I mean, bugs are like you're committing to something, doing something, and it has to do the thing. But yeah, and then all of a sudden, like your engineering team can actually worry about like what is the thing that I now need to go
Because
actually build. Yeah.
the thing that you underestimate is that you look at something and you say, oh, that's going to take an hour to do. But it's not an hour. It's like, there's the conversation about it. There's the headspace that it takes up. There's the fact that it's taking you away from this other thing. Like all of that stuff ends up like, and that, I mean, honestly, like, I think every software business I've ever been a part of has this problem on some level of like, how do you choose what to prioritize when there's constant requests coming in? And it's not just from customers, it's from internal teams, it's from partners, it's from auditors. Like in the context of us being in a publicly traded company, there's random people that are associated with the auditors that are like, hey, I need this thing, and it's like, oh, I don't. Somebody's got to now drop what they're doing and go deal with that thing, right? And so it's like you have to figure out how to. I agree with you, Rashad. Like you got to figure out how to cut that out. I'm curious too. How long did you go where you basically were saying like no to all customer requests?
Even now.
Yeah. And now,
like,
are you
it's
putting them
been
in
4 months.
Is it some sort of like
Sorry?
backlog that you put them in, or do you just say no? Like don't like ask us
Delete.
again in 6 months. Delete. Okay.
Yeah, delete. You got to delete everything, because if it's actually important, they'll still be asking in 6 months. I there was this guy who I used to work with, like one of the funniest people I've ever worked with. But he would answer how many ever emails he got to in that day, and then he would just hit delete on everything else. And he was like, if it's important enough, they'll email me again. And there's actually a lot of wisdom. I mean, like, it was insane, but there was a lot of wisdom in that approach to life, in my opinion. Yeah. But you just have to hit delete. Yeah. And I think, by the way, there's a psychological thing here that we're not talking about, but engineers like to build stuff. Okay. I'm just going to say that. And this sad thing about these little paper cuts is it gives them dopamine. And you need to get rid of that, because now you're not giving them the psychological safety of feeling like they're making progress when they're not actually making progress on the thing that matters. And so if you say you must say no to everything, meaning I'm deleting this entirely, now all of a sudden there's nothing for them to latch onto, which causes this like spiral of like, why can't I get this thing to move? It's because people are doing things that make them feel like they're making progress. It's like, no, you're not allowed to feel like you're making progress unless you're actually making progress. That's the other like sort of psychological reality you have to confront. I don't know if you guys would agree with that, but that's at least been my observation.
100%. Right. You gotta fight those short feedback loops, right? Get people focused on the long-term vision, right? And they can't do that if they're constantly in a like reactionary mode. Yeah, I think it's interesting. That's kind of reminds me of what we were talking about before on CEOs, right? You're a very good operator. You know exactly what you're doing. But another founder in your shoes might not make that decision because for so many reasons it sounds wrong, right? But that's the right decision to get your team to actually focus, right? So yeah, I think that sometimes exposure to that talent that can operate like that can be huge for a business, right? It's why the role exists.
I think focus is very important, but also I think that there's a direct correlation between how long something should have been done versus when it's done versus how, and then correlated to like how long it actually takes. And so I tend to think that like if something can be done quickly, it should be done quickly and it shouldn't be pushed off till later. Because that is progress. So like I actually think that the binary thinking can like make it so that everything feels like it has to be this big thing. But like if an engineer can do like 3 paper cuts in a day versus like chip away at something that might have been larger, I mean, depending on where you're at with the business, like if you have like a ton of customers that really love the thing that you're doing and they want to do something else, I think like serving that dopamine loop fast can potentially have, and it can have like more impact in terms of like momentum generally than like being like, okay, we're only doing this one thing.
Yeah, sorry, Zach. My framework, just to be clear, it is only useful to do what I am saying when you find that the types of things that people are working on are not leading to progress. So like it is a useful tactic when you observe. And so like in No's, again, I don't know the internal workings of No, but like, you know, if you're grappling with how do I push more innovation, you have to interrogate your operating process. For me, it was like I like tripled the size of the team in a year. And when you do that, like no matter what you do, there's going to be places where people are working on things that don't make any sense. I mean, like it's just going to happen. And so like I agree with you. I want to be very clear about this, but it is not a bad tool to use when you're trying to shift something about the current operating behavior in the business. So I just want to be very clear that I'm not saying that like everybody should operate like this. I'm saying you should shift your operation when you want to shift your operation.
I got to head.
Well, good
Just
stuff.
a good
Thanks,
episode.
Bar.
Yeah,
This
thanks,
was
guys.
cool.
Dude,
Thank
this
you.
was wild. Yeah, fun time. All right.
Yeah.
See you
Thanks,
guys.
Appreciate you guys.
Bye.